that's okay. All right. If that's the way it's going to be. And 156G, and throughout this thing we talk about on an ongoing basis provide information to citizens. How does that differ from policy 159? You know.
Policy 159. 159.
Yeah, on page 186.
Through the chair, actually not a lot, and perhaps that might be able to.
Because if you're going to provide information to citizens, you're going to provide information.
Right. It's. I would say it's repetitive.
The point then is compare and edit.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Steve?
Yes.
I have something on 185.
Please.
On the very second to the last program 156H, that involved fire department in the early stage of modifications and so forth. I remember based on the meeting with some of the businesses, they like not only at the early stage, they like the ongoing relationship to make sure the fire is working with them to make sure all the hazardous or fire inadequacy or something are addressed. I don't know whether we need to put something on ongoing or...
Do you have language you'd like to add?
The area that says in early design and on an ongoing basis to review. Well, I was just going to make input and modification as needed. No, I didn't come up with the language.
Mr. Mayor, I think I know what Councilwoman Richardson is speaking to. So it's part of our ongoing inspection program. We can get some language in here to
further edit
that.
Anybody else? Page 186. Sign.
Yeah. Program 158A, policy 158A as an add-on. The last sentence of that, require impact fees and exactions to maintain the level of service to provide for any special equipment need. I can see exactions for providing specialized equipment, but how are you going to require impact fees and then continue a level of service? You know, an impact fee usually is a one-time, you know, you need a piece of equipment, we'll buy it for you. You need this correct, we'll buy it for you. But to maintain a level of service, this could be an ad infinitum. Can impact fees do that?
Yeah.
Through the chair, I think if it said impact fees or exactions might be the better way to go. I think it was anticipated this general plan was kind of on the difference between this general plan and the one it replaced. One of the differences noted in the environmental review of this plan and so forth was that it was more of a performance-oriented general plan. And so I think impact fees were considered something, impact fees was something the city could do. So maybe, you know, that should be, or if the city wanted to adopt a particular impact fee, they could. And the plan generally covers that. It's, you know, if you wanted to adopt a fee, it would be good to have it so noted in the plan, because then that gives you legal authority behind any program you would adopt. So.
How about and/or?
Well, Mr. Mayor, again, I think Councilman Bolgott's actually got a good point here. I mean, your concern is tying this to the level of service,
right?
Which fees, one-time fees, are not really.
Exactly, they won't address that.
They don't really address that. So I think we need to probably rewrite this so that.
Would you mind?
The impact fees are for capital needs, and we're not trying to address ongoing needs of in terms of levels of service in the department through that.
Thank you. That would address my concern.
And in this paragraph, it says it uses the term exactions. Are we still allowed to use that term, or should this be a different term?
No, I'm okay with that. You can, as long as it's related to the impact of the development. I think the whole intent of this paragraph was for capital type of improvements and not level of service. So,
okay, yeah.
Exactions might be requiring a fire engine or fire station facilities to service new development, and that's entirely appropriate in that context.
Okay.
Still.
Thank you.
As long as there's a nexus, yeah.
All right.
I mean, this program is pertaining to capital.
Well, it's talking about new development. And as long as you can tie an exaction to the impact of that development, you still have that ability to require the new development to provide the necessary services and facilities.
There are other comments on this page?
Yes, I do.
Please sign.
158D, as in David, provide for 4-minute travel time for arrival of the first due company at 9. Why is all that in here? Some of this stuff reads like a standard operating procedure rather than a general plan policy. I mean, are you always going to, can you do this 90% of the time? Well,
And I think that the rationale behind this is should a development occur.
Please use the mic.
yeah, okay.
The rationale behind this is that should development or things occur in the community that impact your delivery of service response times, you want to be able to go in and make that a nexus to making changes within the community that may cost somebody some money to do that. And also in terms of providing for safety in the community, it's a standard that we want to maintain. We actually have a greater than 90% travel time of 4 minutes within Brisbane.
Now, the way you put it, that makes sense to me, because we're tying it to something specific, but this is kind of a general statement out of an SOP, man. So if we could maybe qualify that somehow.
So
Possible?
maybe the action item is to have Bill and the fire chief get together and
That
re-edit
sounds good.
this one?
Sounds good. And other than that, I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Any other on this page? On program 157C, it says require new hillside development to upgrade existing roads to meet fire code and city standards. That's a little broad. Let's assume that there's a lot on Kings Road next to my house that's going to be developed. Now, do we require, that's a new hillside development. Do we require it to widen Kings, San Mateo, Humboldt, Sierra Point? What?
Through the chair. I think this is saying upgrade. It's not specifying to what degree. So therefore, the public works director, city engineer, in this case, would have the discretion. Primarily, recall that the primary purpose of the policies in the general plan are to act as a guide to development decisions. And so it's good to have that reference to ground or create the nexus to the condition any department might have in terms of their requirements under development. So the language to upgrade existing leaves the flexibility of the department to determine the condition. Oftentimes, as the case with fire service and so forth, if there's an environmental review, particularly if there's an EIR in the project, it will look at public service response times, or in this case, emergency access to the development. And so this might be linked to a mitigation measure in an environmental review in a project.
I'll tell you that reading this makes the lawyer's hackles in me kind of stand up. And I'd appreciate it if you and Mr. Topple would look at this particular policy and see if you can soothe my hackles.
Okay, we'll do that.
And how's that for a specific assignment?
Yeah, that, I get where you're coming on that, Steve, I think, because that one almost seems like,
You got to have something more clearly to do with the place that's being built and access to that place. And
yeah, maybe need to differentiate.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can clarify a
Please.
little bit. The policy, as I read it, ties it into, excuse me, I got it right in front of me, ties it into to meet fire codes and city standards. So you do have a fire code that addresses this right now. And that code is the 20 feet and 28 feet and that we've been dealing with for many, many years, and it requires people to build over 50% on a remodel to meet the standard. So that's the way this policy is implemented right now. And of course, as a policy, it is broader in language, so that if you were to change your fire code in the future to do something more stringent or to require improvements further away from the impacted property, you could do so.
Let me change the taking away item to have you and Mr. Topple and Mr. Prince look at this language and see if you're satisfied with it.
I will
Yeah, because it could
refrain
be.
from any further input.
I
Do
guess
we
it
have
could-
any more volunteers?
Well, you're not going to add me in it because I agree with you. But I guess the way it can be construed is like what you were saying is it leaves it so open-ended that, oh, by the way, in order for you to build a house there, you got to widen all the streets to get to it, to within this. And
Well, if you were being a lawyer and taking it to the unnatural extreme,
yeah,
that
It's very
could be
broad.
argued.
okay.
No lawyer here would do that. Are we through this page? Anything on 187?
No.
188?
Yes.
I have a question. Go ahead, Mike.
Michael?
This is on policy 163, continue to ensure a 5-minute emergency response instead of 3, and a 15-minute average response instead of 10.
I think everybody flagged that one.
Yeah, I have it
I guess
circled too.
the fire chief then could, or law enforcement, I'm sorry, the police chief could address the standards.
Honorable Counsel, what we did is we took the average response time, taken into consideration at the time that the general plan was written. We've had additional developments from the marina, which is, we have the hotels there, and the Northeast Ridge development. So of course, realistically, the average time is generally less than what is stated here, but on an average, that's a 5-minute and a 15-minute.
I don't have a problem with the 15-minute average response for other calls or services, but the 5-minute emergency, I kind of have a problem with is if the fire truck can make it to anything in 4 minutes, and we have generally 3 cars on duty, I think we should be able to cut the time on that.
Yes, but the fire department usually is running maybe 1 or 2 calls a day at max. We run quite a few more, so if we are tied up on a call, we can't necessarily break free and respond to a second emergency at the same time. So it could cause a delay, or we have to get somebody to come from another jurisdiction, which is also going to take some more time.
Mm-hmm.
Our target is under 5, would be 3 if we aren't doing anything else, but we're talking about an average, so we picked 5.
Okay.
And 5 comes from your data, right? This is what we're
It's
currently
data-driven.
able to provide now, given our level of service.
Yes.
And so in order to reduce that response time, we could do that by hiring, say, twice as many officers and twice as many cars?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
I have a couple.
Please, Si.
Provide level of police protection of personal property proportional to the size of law enforcement needs of the community within. What does that mean?
You're talking about policy 160 now.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Proportional to the size and law enforcement needs of the community.
Through the chair. I think that's to reflect that the population will grow over time, and so the law enforcement should remain proportional. If there's 1 officer per 1,000 people, or 100 people, or 5, whatever the standard is, that it would proportionally grow with the population. And I think that's the intent of that. That's original general plan language. It's not new.
Seems to me it could be a little clearer, but I guess that's the way it's.
Anything else on this page?
No, I don't know.
Page 189.
Yes, I did have one. This is Program 165F. Continue to work with community organizations to develop an awareness of the problems in the community, as well as the services provided by the city to address these problems. I was wondering if we can incorporate language about what the problems are. And this goes back to information like a police blotter or police statistics on crime, something like that, some generic language, if we could work something like that up, because we're not doing neighborhood meetings right now, are we?
We do, as if they are requested from the residents. If there's a particular crime trend in an area and we identify it through a community-oriented policing, then we do encourage someone in the block to host a party so that we can address the concern.
Okay.
Yes.
But I'd like this awareness of the problems to kind of be codified somehow. If we can come up with some program or some language to include in this program here that helps us get out the information to the community, what the problems are, I'd appreciate that. That's all I had on page 189.
I have one.
Sign?
165B as in boy. Continue foot patrols as part of the officer's daily activities and the use of bicycles. I don't think we do that, do we? Bicycle patrol, foot patrol?
Yes, we currently have bicycles that we use predominantly during the summertime when the weather's a little nicer.
Oh,
We
okay.
also have some racks that we can put on the back of the patrol car so the officers can use the bicycles in the marina, hit the docks, or as well as our industrial area, and still be able to put the bike on the vehicle and respond to calls.
So foot patrol
And the use of bicycles.
and use a bicycle for
Yes.
foot.
We just don't have Mike Orr out there.
And we see them during summer at the community park.
Yes, that's correct.
I thought on some of these things that it seems to me a good writer could consolidate all of these into a paragraph or two and save us a lot of paper, but I guess that's the way, is that the way the general plan is supposed to read? I know the last one did.
Well, the problem is that we had the general plan that we got.
Yeah.
So we get to
We're
work
revising
from
the one
that.
we got, okay. I'm done on that page, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else on this page?
And nothing on 190?
No, I'm okay.
Anybody on 190?
No.
On bottom of 190, program 160D,
166?
166D. Says, the last line says, do not allow residential development if such hazardous conditions cannot be mitigated to an acceptable level. And I would change that to do not allow residential development or childcare facilities. Anything else?
No.
Can you read that? I'd just like to know how public gets input into the process.
At the end tonight, anybody who wants to input anything on any of these pages will be asked to do so. Page 191.
I had a question on policy 171. Investigate use of Brisbane circulation system to transport hazardous waste and recommend effective management measures, which are what? I guess you can't really define all that here, but you're going to use our. Are you suggesting here that we outlaw the transportation of hazardous materials over certain streets? And I was and what effective management measures are there?
Sir, this question came up at the Planning Commission, and it was broached because of the language that you see in there that was existing in the general plan. And to be frank with you, the first part of the conversation is that we don't have very good data or records right now of whether or not that is even occurring. And when I think of the use of our circulation system, I'm thinking of our transportation infrastructure, primarily Bayshore Boulevard. So the intent of putting that in there and modifying this language slightly was to recognize what it is we don't know, what it is we might be able to ascertain, and that we might make some decision at some point in time. But we don't know exactly. We don't know what we don't know right now, to be truthful.
And at some point, are we going to do something about this? In other words, delegate the hazardous materials transportation to certain streets?
Well, sir, if this becomes part of the general plan, it's certainly city program and policy, and one of the departments is going to take it on, and I have a strong suspicion it's going to be mine. And we'll investigate it, and we will bring recommendations back to the council for your decision.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Appreciate that. That's all I have.
Anything else on this page? Page 192?
Nothing. I'm clear.
The second line, and includes substance types. Would you look at that from an editorial point of view?
Substance types.
I'm not sure what's meant, but
Include types of substances.
some editorial is required. Moving down toward the middle of the page, begins the Federal Comprehensive Environmental Response. In the next line, or Superfund Act, it should be or the Superfund Act. Any more on this page?
No.
Page 193. Page 194. 195.
Getting all updated maps, right?
Yeah, right.
196.
I had a question here.
Which policy side?
170. I got 172B circular. As appropriate, seek to direct state and federal funds to remediate contaminated lands in Brisbane. Is that our job? To remediate contaminated lands? I mean, are we talking about the baylands?
Yes, sir. Bill and I are having a sotto voce conversation over here, but as Bill points out, it's barely a language change from the first general plan, and we're trying to recreate in history what happened there. But it would seem that if at the staff level we somehow become aware of state or federal funds that would be possible to be directed towards any area that's contaminated, including private lands, it would seem that there's a greater good for the citizenry at large if we can so cause that to be directed. And any action such as that, certainly if it came as a grant, would be fabulous. If it came as a grant that had matching funds, then that would be a decision the council would make. So that was why it was left in there.
I'm reasonably sure that was what we were talking about 13 years ago.
Okay. And require private property owners to, that's 172C as in Charles, remediate contaminated lands consistent with, we're talking about, okay, now I have them. Thank you. That clarified it for me.
Anything else on this page?
No.
Page 197.
Nothing.
Page 198. 99.
The only question I had on 197 maybe.
Back to
It's not-
197?
That's okay. It's a general question on that. We use the 65 decibels as a kind of a standard, right? Anything above that. What's the advantage? Can we lower that standard? Is it legal to do so, or?
There are state level standards. It may be possible to go below those standards with your own individual noise ordinance.
Assuming we can justify that lower standard. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
All right. That's. Thank you. That's all.
Well, we do have noise studies
Yeah.
of what ambient noise is, because we get, on a clear, calm night, you hear cars from the freeway, and I'm not sure what the decibel level is, but I think we do have data from that, don't we?
Indeed, a matter of fact, it is anticipated that we would update this traffic noise corridor map that you see in their figure XL, which does have, as you can see, again, the resolution is not great, but it does indicate decibel levels from US 101 being 75 decibels, which certainly not desirable for residential uses. You look at your land uses, your what they call sensitive receptors like residential, hospitals, schools, and so forth, where you wouldn't want them to have continual exposure to levels certainly in exceedance of the state outdoor standard, which is the 65, and the indoor standard, which is 45. Usually with certain mitigations, double pane windows, the correct architecture, different types of mitigations, you can get the interior noise level standard
And a green
down
building.
below 45.
A green building.
Green.
Is the decibel scale, is that a logarithmic scale?
Yes, it's a weighted
Okay.
scale.
Okay, page 199.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Please.
And Chief Commander, our officers do have decibel meters, like if you get a noise complaint or something like that, they have handheld ones, they can go out and check. Doesn't happen very often, though.
Not very often.
Page 199.
Nothing.
Nothing. Page 200. Page 201.
Nothing.
202.
Wait, I have something.
I just had a notation in here. It was referring to Bay Area, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. That's a self-funded program, right? I mean, they get their funds through fines. Is that correct? Or do you know?
Through the chair, I'm not sure in terms of their whole budget. I imagine that certainly a portion of their budget, perhaps a good share of the budget, is through fines and permits, fees for permits.
Okay, yeah, I thought that it was, and mainly for some of the fines that I've seen them hand out down in Silicon Valley. $500,000 a pop is not unusual.
And you know, there are many other noise generating equipment, planes, loud vehicles without muffling devices.
I must be on the wrong page.
Yeah, well, I'm on 202.
202, I was on 203,
I jumped
sorry.
And I don't know if we can get him into the conflict resolution center, but there's got to be some way to address that. I guess call the PD and let them chase him down, right?
Through the chair, it isn't intended that we, as I said in the staff report, we really haven't updated the noise section. We will bring that back to you for a preliminary and draft review in the future. But most of these, as you noted, with the aircraft and so forth, is traffic. Most of your noise problem is generated from vehicles and aircraft. And so you want to look at your land use element, your circulation element, and understand the land use dispersion and the volumes on the roadways, and then do a noise study of existing levels and project those levels out with the growth anticipated in the plan. So that's why we kind of left this until after you look at the land use and circulation element, and we do the environmental review, and that will have better information to do the update of the noise section.
Thank you, that's fine.
Anything else on page 202? Page 203. I have one suggestion in the fourth paragraph, the fourth line, there's a reference to the U.S. EPA website. Let's provide the domain name. Page 204. Page 205. Page 206.
I have something.
Please.
Let's see. Program 194D, encourage commercial, retail, and residential developments to participate in or create transportation management associations and to implement vehicle trip reduction measures. So, transportation management plans are required, is that right, of new developments? And I'm mainly concerned about residential developments. I'm wondering if that's a term of art, or I'm thinking about if somebody builds their own home, are they going to get socked with an implementation of a vehicle trip reduction measure?
Through the chair, those studies are triggered by thresholds, CCAG thresholds for transportation management plans, and I believe it would take 100 residential uses or 100 trips to trigger the need for the study. So a single-family home would not do that.
Then can we include in the language?
Yeah, because we currently have where the city participates in the transportation management program right now, which is 15-member cities, which Brisbane holds a chair. Maybe we should reword it and then address that also, within that, because I don't see a point of creating a new one.
I think the Public Works Director just gave me a clarification, as I understand this. It's to encourage existing. The new ones would trigger the requirement. It's to try to encourage existing retail, residential developments to participate.
Oh, so you'll make that change? Any other questions on this page, Michael?
I had two more items on this page. In Program 194E, it says cooperate with surrounding jurisdictions to provide incentives. Quibble. The other jurisdictions have to want to cooperate as well. So if there's some way to indicate that, I know that Brisbane is very forward-looking, and there may be times when we look forward better than others and don't get the cooperation. But it would be nice to say something that fosters encouragement from the other side as well.
That is happening. This must be new, this program, because that is happening. And Seppi, you're on the board
Yes, the Alliance.
of the Peninsula Congestion Relief
Yes.
Alliance.
We are the role model, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, in a sense, that is happening. So maybe you want to say continue, cooperate, because Daly City's on there, Colma, Brisbane, South San Francisco, Millbrae, Burlingame, all the way down to Redwood City and Menlo Park, and 15 cities. So
Continue to cooperate.
Yep,
Yeah.
they're adding more cities.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, Mike, but that's kind of happening right now. So and there's van pools and that shuttle service that's provided for citizens for free right now.
Right.
Is all
And that
part
was a
of
joint
that.
effort, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had my last one on this page is,
Please.
let's see, this is part of Policy 194. I'm suggesting a new program under Policy 194 that says attempt to minimize dependence on automobile travel by encouraging transit, bicycle, and pedestrian alternatives and incorporating alternatives to the automobile and land use planning and project design. I'd like to insert a policy that refers to our success at seeking funding for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Because I think by actually building bicycle and pedestrian improvements, we encourage transit, we encourage bicycle and pedestrian use. So I'm saying,
If
Would that be a program?
Program 194.
F? Yeah, okay.
And will you give Bill the language?
Sure.
So he's got it. Anything else? On policy 195, somebody did some editorial. Should now read support, delete the word for.
Yeah.
So read support federal and state programs.
Yeah, I was reading that.
Page 207.
What does support mean? Are we supporting them with funds or just
Well,
moral?
Through
with
the
this
chair,
administration, we don't want to go there.
through the chair, it might be simply as the council passing a resolution to support a day or whatever resolutions you might approve in that regard.
Thank you. Page 207.
Nothing.
Page 208.
I have a typo, I think, on program 198C, the first line. It says, consider providing incentives as a part of land use. I think there should be a space between the A and the P of a part.
Perhaps we should adopt a new policy to use spell check.
Now that it's
A
available.
part is spelled correctly,
It is spelled correctly, yes.
We'd like to borrow it or buy a conjunction along with a vowel.
Anything else on this page?
Well, I was toying with the idea, and this is probably far-fetched, but policy 201, encourage households and businesses to properly manage materials that affect air quality and replace these materials with safer alternatives. And the program 201A is provide information on the effects of air quality from inefficient burning in old fireplaces. Now, I know that there's a PG&E subsidy or program where if you replace your old washing machine or dishwasher with a new efficient one, you get some sort of rebate. Is there such a thing for pellet stoves or for those freestanding wood-burning stoves that radiate heat rather than suck heat out of the house? Is that something the city could explore or offer? I'm just thinking that when it gets cold, we get these warnings now from the Air Quality Management District, don't use your fireplace. Well, that's the only night of the year you want to use your fireplace. And it seems to me that if we could come up with a program, I'd like to explore a program whereby the city helps underwrite or find sponsors for or something for these efficient burning wood stoves or maybe catalytic converters in the chimneys or something like that so that people can use their fireplaces when it's cold rather than when it's hot.
You can see if there's some kind of program out there that would encourage that. Is that?
It sounds like it's an exploration to do.
Yeah, I don't know of any existing program. I just
Yeah,
like
I don't either. There may be something. There may be something there, and that might.
I would hope. I mean, it'd be nice if there was, but
So the action item is Bill will check.
yes.
Yeah, in policy 200, I guess had the question. It was the same as the other one, was how to support state and federal programs, but I guess that's show support. That'd be more correct.
Run up the flag.
Yeah.
Any more on 208? 209? Michael.
One question on the last paragraph. Water for domestic use and for fire protection is supplied to Brisbane by the San Francisco Water Department. Are we buying is it supplied by the PUC or the Water Department?
PUC would be more correct, sir.
Can we change that then?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Anything else on 209? Page 210,
I had a
please.
program 206B as part of the annual budget and capital improvements program. Since we're moving to a biannual budget cycle and capital improvement cycle, can we just replace the word annual with the word city? So it should read as part of the city budget and capital improvements program. Is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
I had a question on 210. Up in the very first paragraph, Randy, in mid paragraph says fire protection service is also adequate except in the current GVMID area where an additional 1.49 million gallons storage are needed to service Crocker to current standards. Is this out of the 1994 general plan? Because I think, didn't we build a 1 million gallon tank?
Yes, sir, it is. We're going to have to, let us get back to you on that.
Okay.
Please.
So we need to revise that number then.
To edit.
Edit, okay.
Anything else on page 210?
Yes.
Please.
On Program 206C, this is a question for the fire experts in the room. Is it possible for Brisbane to lower its fire insurance rating?
Not by just water supply. You could, adding additional fire stations, really the only way you're going to see the ISO rating come down is if you add additional staffing. But if your water system went the other direction, you would see your ISO rating go up, which would then potentially cause you cost for your fire insurance.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going
Is
to
it on
follow
the
up
subject? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a follow-up, Chief. Now, and I can see the problem when we have one engine company, which will be fat forever, once we got rid of the reserves and all. But now that we're part of the North County Fire Authority, and now with all the boundaries are being dropped, the issue is how much equipment can you get to a fire scene? We can get a hell of a lot, pardon the expression, a lot more equipment nowadays than we could ever before. So I would think that would play favorable. Now we're thinking about the ISO, so I should remove favorable.
It is. It helps, but it will not take the place of more immediate fire companies within your community. It doesn't get you enough points to make a difference. But you do get some little amount of credit. But there's so many other elements within the ISO rating system that you're not going to be able to. You would have to spend so many millions of dollars just to reduce your ISO rating by a grade that it's not practical to do so. So most communities look to make sure they don't do things to adversely affect their ISO rating. That's why most communities don't strive to be an ISO rating 1, because the cost of getting there would far and exceed potentially the value of having that level of fire protection.
Are they on a merit or a demerit system now?
I'm not sure what you mean. Other than
it's get points.
Yeah, it's all a point system, and it goes from water supply is just one element. Staffing, communicate. There's many elements of the grading system for ISO.
Thank you for your candid answer, Chief. Thank you.
And finally on this page,
Please.
I had Policy 207, prohibit private on-site water tanks. So I think there's been some discussion lately of, in the Bay Area anyway, of gray water use, reuse, and I'm wondering if that would be prohibited by this policy. I know that there is some discussion, or there was discussion at the Planning Commission about collection of rainwater and
Like a citron?
yeah, cisterns, and I'm wondering, the concern here is for, it was public health and safety, but was it because these tanks would be connected to the water supply? If these tanks were isolated from the water supply, would it still be a concern if we had, mosquito fish in there? I'm just kind of trying to understand the issues around this.
Well, the primary issue, sir, is that at one point in time, excuse me, recognizing the cost to develop the city's public water system and to extend it to some of the higher elevations in town, folks were proposing to put their own pressurized water systems in or their own elevated tanks. And the concern with that is that once you've got a private system, that whether it's a tank or whether it's a pressurized system, because it's got its own pump on site, regardless, what you have now is the potential for a water system where you don't have active control over the quality of the water that's in there or what's actually in the system. And because it's at a higher grade line or higher hydraulic grade line potentially than your system, something as simple as a water main break, fire department responding to a fire and dropping down the local pressure in the public system, you could be back siphoning that into your system. So the concern is to make sure that there's not an on-site system which could develop a higher water pressure than your lowest water pressure.
So this is a concern with a tank that would be intertied with the city's supply
Yes,
system.
sir.
I see. Is it possible to consider rewording this so that private on-site water tanks could be permitted if they were not tied into the system and not used for potable water? I'm thinking about rain collection for gardening, really, and gray water reuse for gardening. That's really what I'm...
I don't think we had considered that before, but let us offline look at some language for that, sir.
Great, thank you.
Seppi?
A question. In some areas, and even here, GV, MID, Guadalupe Valley, Do we need to spell it out first, or are we going to have a sheet at the end or in the beginning of the book that would give some description for some of these short words? For example, we had CCAG. If somebody is reading it, would they understand what CCAG?
I think it would be appropriate for there to be a definitions or an abbreviation section at the beginning of the general plan or at the end in an index.
And the other question that I had, on the policy 206, the second program 2066C, it says insurance service office. Is that states? Is that cities?
No, that's
ISO is private, and they primarily exist for the benefit of insurance companies for rating fire hazard in communities.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on 206 or on 210? Page 211?
I have one, or actually
Art?
two. Program 211A, that says consider requirements. That should say 4 additional protective devices as appropriate. And then I have a proposal for new policy, and I want to discuss this a bit. Council cares to, and that's to investigate the feasibility of a portable desalination system for emergency use. And Randy, I think you might be familiar with those from your military background. And the reason I bring this up is from emergency purposes. A number of years ago, I think it was 82, and Lisa, you might remember this slide, I'm sure you do, where the main broke on the water tank at Glen Park Way, and it flooded the trailer courts, everything flooded, and basically water was cut off for like about 2 or 3 days. And people had to actually go to the fire station to fill up buckets and stuff, just, they couldn't shower, but kind of semi-potable water that they had to boil and everything like that. And that, given our water comes from Hetch Hetchy, and does it come through Crystal Springs up there, around there? Or how's that work?
Yes, sir, it does. Sometimes it's direct pipe, but sometimes it's pumped into, when it's pumped into and offline, put into Crystal Springs, and it has to be treated.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's sitting right on the San Andreas Fault. Crystal Springs runs right down the middle of it, or the fault runs right down the middle of, you know what I mean. So anyway, if something catastrophic happened where we were completely cut off, I think we'd have to find a way to provide potable water, at least drinking water for citizens, somewhat healthy, and we certainly wouldn't be able to rely on grocery stores or everywhere else, because the whole infrastructure might be cut off. And I'm just looking at something, if we had a system where we could, since we have the bay there, it looks like it may be filling up.
You may have more water than you need, is what you're suggesting, us.
Water.
That would fix both the problems, perhaps. That we could have the salinated turn into potable. That'd be great. It's water into wine, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, sir, and I guess I would just suggest is that maybe that's not as elegantly done inside a general plan, because it's something that we just have a thought on.
Okay.
In partial response to you, I will tell you that yes. The San Mateo County Office of OES has published an annex to the emergency operation plan, which talks about potable water distribution and how that would be done. Mm-hmm. But certainly, you're right as a council member. If you would like us to investigate the cost and the feasibility of obtaining a desal unit and just getting a number on that, and then we could use it, we could apply it with grants or whatever. But maybe not do it as part of the general plan, because it's sort of an idea right now, and we don't know how feasible it might or might not be.
Okay, well, it doesn't have to be part of it. I'm okay with that, but I think it's something that I really would like to look into as far as, cost. Maybe military actually has some surplus units, that I know we've been able to get good deals on stuff in the past, and, does the rest of the council think about that?
Sounds good.
See if you have
No reason not to explore it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Happy, sir.
Anything else on 211? Anything on page 212?
Yes, I was a little confused by the language of the paragraph that's headed with the sanitary sewers heading. The way I'm reading it, it's a second sentence. The Bayshore Sanitary District serves the northern part of the city and pumps its flow to the City of San Francisco's treatment plant. But immediately before that, I was talking about the City of Brisbane Sewer District, and in the next paragraph, it discusses that the City of Brisbane's service area also takes, the treatment takes place at the San Francisco treatment plant. Could we rework these paragraphs to kind of make it
Rewrite.
more cohesive? Because
Please.
it just left me a little bit confused. That's all.
Anything else on this page? Page 213,
Just going to wait to see if.
fire.
Okay. This is really Clark's baby. I don't know if it makes sense.
He will hardly ever shut up, so you go ahead.
Just having heard, Clark try and find new sources of revenue to repair and maintain the water and sewer supply lines in town, I was wondering if Program 212C could have RDA funds inserted. Take advantage of opportunities to apply special funds such as grants, RDA funds, or RDA funds to improvements of the existing system.
Staff okay with that?
Yeah, matter of fact, we're currently doing that, so.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Anything else on this page?
Yeah, policy 217 says prohibit new septic systems and require connection to city sanitary sewer system. Isn't this part of the building code?
My question was, how many septic systems have we got left?
2, 1 now. 1.
We're down to one, but I mean, part
Not
of
going
new,
any more in, though, sir.
I mean, it just seems to me like why even put prohibit new septic systems? I mean, that's part of the uniform building code, at least, or is it part of the? You know what I mean? In Brisbane, our building code doesn't allow septic systems, right?
You're correct, sir. Our building code in Brisbane does not, but overall, the California Building Code does recognize certain cases when you can do it.
In certain areas, certain
right. So I
rural
think what
areas.
we've done is we use the general plan language as the underlying basis for the municipal code. So that's why we'd like to suggest leaving it in here. That way we can continue to disallow it in the municipal code and we're consistent.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like something you do, but yes, sir, you never know. Somebody might
Well,
come
I'm
up with
sure
it.
there's people that like to, but I mean, I'm just.
Anything else on page 213?
No.
Page 214? I just had a question. In the middle of the page, you're talking about the old brick arch under Bayshore Boulevard. I haven't heard anything about that arch in 10 years. What is it? Still the same arch it ever was?
It hasn't moved to my knowledge, sir. Yes, yes, sir. It is the same arch that it always is, and it's certainly one of the key pieces of conversation as far as development proposals related to the Baylands and how stormwater flow is going to be handled. It's a key conveyance facility, and my staff and I have had numerous questions over its existing capacity, over its existing actuarial life, how much longer we really expect that thing to operate. Does it even make sense for us to if a development ever does get passed and we get starting to think about the infrastructure, is that something we want to consider as part of the infrastructure, recognizing that it could fail sometime in the near future? So it's still there. We're monitoring it.
And we're highly aware of it in dealing with any Baylands development.
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely.
You taken a tour of it lately?
I've not been on the little boat recently. No, sir.
How big is that? Is that
If memory serves me, it's 8 foot.
8 foot? It's so you, I mean, you can walk through that. I mean, in a sense.
Oh, yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah, you can walk.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty big.
Well, sir, you could walk through it. I just I wasn't offering to take a guided tour.
Have you walked through it?
I have been at either end of it. I haven't walked all the way through it.
Oh, you haven't walked all.
It actually tends to hold a pretty good amount of water in its invert, so I think
I would think
a
that
little
it
flat
would.
push boat would be a
Yeah.
lot drier evolution.
Seems like one of those ones in France, you know, that was built in the 1400 to 1500s is still in use, you know, just.
Anything else on page 214?
I'm done.
To what? 15?
215,
I got 215, yeah.
please sign.
I think Mike alluded to this earlier, on policy 219, as a part of the city's budget, not annual budget, because we're no longer there. And also, 219B, encourage fee assessments to provide for the maintenance and repair of the system. That seems like a legitimate statement, but we have a committee working on this now. Clark and I, for water and sewer rates, so,
This is storm drain now.
oh, is this something? Well, you still, you know, if that's the case, who do we assess? Are we assessing,
Daly City.
Sir, storm drain is now subject to Prop 218 requirements. So if we were to decide that we were going to go forward and try and get funds of a CIP nature, of a large nature, so that we could upgrade our existing system, one of the possible ways you could do that would be to create a citywide storm drain assessment. And I think the intent for putting encourage in there was that if we do go off on such a journey, and that we're going to try and create a citywide assessment district, that we would certainly need to encourage the voters with understanding of why it is that we would be doing that. That we've got a, depending upon whether you consider private, public, or public and private, a $5 to $15 million deficit on identified CIP projects right now, and there's no source for those projects to fund those projects. So that's why the language says encourage, because if we have to go off, we have to get a vote on it. We need to encourage the voters to favorably consider it and to show why our case is strong and why it makes sense to support
Very
it. To support a
bureaucratic
self-assessment.
program to get the
But you're
politician shot.
the direct answer to your question is we're assessing ourselves.
well, is there some way to maybe clarify that a little bit? So
Sure, we'll take a shot.
I didn't get that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that. And that's all I have.
Anything else on page 215? Anything on page 216?
I'm done.
Page 217 and 218 are footnotes. Well, now, I have requests for public comment. Dana Dilworth.
Take a quick break first.
Yeah, the answer is we're going to take a quick break first. Being dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I have quite a bit, but I'll try to be brief. In the introduction, I'm pleased that you've expanded it to include issues about global warming, but it fails to mention the new thinking about hazardous chemicals as the new legislation from the European Union, which is called EU REACH, suggests. Additionally, the website for the Department of Toxic Substance Controls has a section called Emerging Issues. These are issues for which we do not yet have regulations, but they still represent a potential health risk, health and safety risks. They are nanotechnology, biomonitoring, pharmaceutical waste, the European Union REACH, and perhaps on the positive side, green chemistry. Other issues not being considered by DTSC, which have impacts to health in the way of allergic responses and commerce in terms of healthcare costs and loss of diversity, are bioengineered products and plants. Regarding the passivity of the city, or that the city has taken regarding deferring action to regulators, I wish to express my experience with the Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory Group. While the paragraph states you don't have the authority to regulate it, it fails to recognize the public trust responsibility that the city has, absent regulations that these agencies and responsible parties have. Program 144B, requiring an annual check with the responsible agencies, has proven to be inadequate. 1 full year ago, it was a citizen action, me, that caused a violation order to be issued against Universal Paragon for a leak that was initially observed and theoretically remediated in the 80s. Under order over 10 years old, there was no follow-up required by the city or agency, and it just happened to slip through the cracks. 10 continuous years of toxins leaking into the bay while we had these general plan policies in place. I suggest stronger language, more frequent observations, and more oversight. A policy to consider would be impose stronger regulations to protect the public as required. If the regulations don't exist, we can do them. And I've had this discussion several times with Vic Powell at the Water Board when I say to him, well, why aren't you asking higher standards? And he says, well, we don't have to, but you can, meaning the city. And so we end up with this catch-22 where nobody's stepping up to the higher ground of protecting the public. They're just giving a minimal cleanups, minimal observation, minimal everything, and in my opinion, has an impact in our public health and safety. Policy 147, and these policies as a whole, because I know these are broken down by different things like slope stability, but should mention impact fees to contribute to health services. And also, I noticed a couple of times where you speak to education, you don't speak to health education. And the letter that I'm submitting mentions specific places. While Brisbane doesn't have a health department, it is something that cities often have. We should consider in the future as we grow, and that retrofitting a fee structure to deal with health services would be difficult. So I'm suggesting we do this up front. Under emergency preparedness, I'm suggesting that the city seek a second or an alternative location from the fire station. There is a chance that because the fire station is in the floodplain and adjacent to Kinder Morgan, it would be unavailable during certain kinds of situations. And I would suggest that you consider Lippman School or maybe the pool house or something like that to be considered as an alternate emergency response area. Regarding slope stability, where engineered mitigation is required, there needs to be a policy that measures or recommends, that ensures that the measures or recommendations will work. Some communities require double bonding and or a letter of credit. The language could be something like require sufficient, and by sufficient I mean, if you want to talk about increasing due to the GPA or whatever, so that's why I put the word sufficient in. Require sufficient long-term financial assurances and a contingency plan to ensure that engineered solutions work. I question your statement that the planning area is rated as having low susceptibility to landslides because it's not true of the entire planning area, and it gives a false sense of security that may put the city at risk should a developer call you on it. I suggest rewriting this section and acknowledge that some studies have been done on the Southwest Bayshore area. Many times when you're mentioning the state maps, I'm just not certain why you're not including the USGS maps, which are more up to date than our 1994 general plan, which I think is the reason why it had been omitted, but I'm not certain. Regard flood hazards, first I just have to reiterate that the storm drainage, water, and sewer master plans have not been reviewed under CEQA, and our alternatives have not been considered. And I'm just...
Where are you at? What section?
That's X4, flood hazard.
Actually, I've noticed that it seems that there's a letter here that Dana has put together, but maybe if we could get copies of that.
Right.
I would love to have a copy.
Right. Okay. Okay. And no alternatives have been considered from these master plans that you are now incorporating into this document. And I'm asking whether you've read these plans and you know their contents. Particularly missing is the use of permeable paving and natural attenuation methods. The daylighting of former creeks, while primarily a conservation issue, should be referenced here as a way to regulate speed and volume of rainwater. And an active policy to replace, and I don't know what the language is, streets, sidewalks, water shedding, transportation surfaces, whatever you call them, to replace these impermeable sidewalks with permeable products where otherwise not regulated. And the reason that the regulation thing is it's probably not going to be allowed on the Baylands to have any type of permeable storm drainage system, but other areas in town it would be entirely appropriate. A presentation to the Viz Valley Redevelopment Agency Advisory Group showed methods employed both in Portland and Zurich, Switzerland, which reduces flooding by planted and staggered strips in lieu of hard aqueducts. And actually on hillsides it was pretty interesting because they had little bump outs that went back and forth to slow down the water coming down hillsides. So I thought, and I guess Switzerland's really steep, so they have been dealing with these issues for some time. Well, the language of bioswales are being used by people like Universal Paragon. Bioswales or any natural attenuation should be something greater than hay bales and twine, but to be considered locations that can serve as mini, M-I-N-I, habitat for frogs and water-dependent animals. The document fails to mention Wetlands is a well-recognized technique to buffer flooding hazard impacts. And I also want to know what's the status of the siltation studies, because there are issues here that still say to look into it. We've had a siltation study, I think the task right now is to establish regulations and fines to mitigate the siltation. Somehow these regulations haven't been adequate to prevent the lagoon from filling up as it has been doing. Regarding fire hazard, one impact...
Dana, we'll provide everybody on the council and staff with a copy of this. Can you finish up, please?
Okay. You did say we could say what needed to be said earlier, so we could go through the tape and repeat that, because I was happy to hear it. But I will summarize. I'm sure you don't like to hear this. On fire hazards, you haven't mentioned impacts of explosion, and examples would be to require bulletproof glass, non-flammable surfaces, and steel framing. Or an alternative would be to downzone areas or use open space zonings to protect areas that are unsafe and not just fire hazard. On personal property and safety, I think the education should be an outreach to the community as a whole, not just the youth, and particularly about drug problems. You hear people getting addicted to Vicodin, and then, adults doing those things. I think it's a broader issue than just to educate children. Well, hazardous materials, I'll reiterate the European Union and public trust issues. In the third paragraph, page 190, it fails to mention that everyday products contain substances. It's not just solvents. That children's toys have been found to contain PCB, vinyl chloride, mercury, and lead. So I just think that we might have the hazards in a little bottle under a sink is a misnomer. I guess on landfill contamination and remediation, I'll reiterate the thing about medical and pharmaceutical waste. I question your description of the landfill site and have inserted the description from the Water Board because you have omitted that the landfill contains shipyard waste, sewage, and industrial waste. And I do not believe in that the chapter that says that the city lacks the power to be involved directly in the state-supervised cleanup and abatement process is not correct. Maybe somebody from DTSC can provide you with information, but I think that section should be revisited. And I think some of the maps should be redone because MTBE has been documented under the tank farm, and that's not included in the hazardous waste list. On air quality, I would suggest that program 190C regarding the dust monitor be stronger so that it happens instead of is considered. And I'm asking if you've seen any regulations regarding zero emissions communities. That is definitely one way to approach having better air quality. This general plan seems to be business as usual. It doesn't mention that we have little Sunday hot rodders that use ATVs on Sierra Point. And if it were to speak to ATVs, perhaps they could be prohibited, and those people asked not to destroy the little wetlands there. I agree about the fireplaces that Michael had mentioned. Regarding the airport, I think you should add some language about asking the airport to cease fuel dumping over Brisbane. That you're mentioning idling, but oftentimes they dump their fuel before and after leaving. Regarding sanitary sewer and storm drains, I would just ask that you consider that there is a real problem at the north end on the San Francisco side at Sunnydale Street, which backflows and causes sewage to actually end up in people's homes. That Brisbane could actually be a solution, and by providing or considering a state-of-the-art sewage plant that could utilize tertiary water treatment in the form of wetlands. It would be revenue generating and could provide a steady source of polished, clean water to flow southward to the lagoon. Modern waste plants have less negative effects than past plants, and some of them are entirely underground. So I would ask that you consider these things and give us some stronger regulations to protect us. And I appreciate you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burr.
Despite the look of this, I'll try to be brief. John Christopher Burr, proud to be a lifelong resident of Brisbane. The first thing I'm going to do is incorporate by reference, as if fully set forth herein in this public hearing, some documents and information. Fortunately, Ms. Dilworth mentioned that the European Union's new law called REACH. This is going to be the world's strictest law on toxins. And I'm referring to an article from the LA Times, which I'll enter into the record. And it says that 30,000 substances are going to be regulated. And looking at the EPA, our EPA, the federal government, after all these years, they've only looked at a very minor number, like less than 100, I think, chemicals for the health and safety consequences. And it's pretty ridiculous what our governments have done. Anyway, this legislation is going to have far-reaching consequences on everybody in this room. What it means is that if any product has any of the banned toxic substances, it'll be turned back at the border in Europe. So that if America and Brisbane and California want to stay competitive in the world market, we're going to have to prove compliance with this law. So I've got the full text of the law. Now, the cool thing about this law, not only does it show all the bad substances, and it's all been peer-reviewed by the world's top scientists, it has ways of testing and things like that. And it has a way of dealing with this terrible problem. One of the things, too, is that the Europe's law is going to lead to safer products on both sides of the Atlantic. And I'll just enter this into the record. Here's one thing, too. Is under the United States 30-year-old Toxic Substances Control Act. That's the Superfund law, where the oil companies are taxed to pay for the pollution. And generally, the polluter or the landowner is charged with the so-called cleanup costs. Over the years, it's been co-opted and reduced and weakened, and so it's pretty ineffectual. And it says here, here's an example of how bad our government really is in this area. Under the United States 30-year-old Toxic Substances Control Act, the Environmental Protection Agency has little legal authority to ban or restrict chemicals in use before 1976. So DDT, all these nasty, rotten chemicals are not really touched by this law. And here in Brisbane, there must be tons and tons of mercury dumped out there. It's in light bulbs. It's in all kinds of things. Thermometers from the hospital, broken film products, just tons of stuff. Mercury's in, and they didn't even look for it. They didn't even look for mercury. It's amazing to me that they didn't look for mercury. And then they tell women, especially pregnant women, don't eat tuna, don't eat fish because it's got mercury in it. So I'm going to enter that into the record. And once again, this is the full text, the full 800 pages.
You can give all that to the city clerk when you
I'm going to give it to you now. This is the full text, the full 800 pages, and I'm incorporating that as if fully set forth therein. I'm done with that now. So here you go. And here, we can take a look at this and pass it up. Here's what the law is called, too. It's called the...
John, please go back to the podium.
Well, here. Here's a copy for you. Here. This is all in the record. Pass that up. Okay, so the new law is entered into the record. And, we don't really have a lot of choice but to comply if we want to stay competitive. The nice advantage is that the environmental improvement, so will public health and safety. And that should reduce our healthcare costs long term and our educational costs too, because Johnny might not have some kind of mental disease or whatever. Won't have a problem reading. Let's see. Next, I'm going to incorporate by references if fully set forth herein some pictures from the San Francisco earthquake of 1906.
Please give those to staff.
Well, I'll incorporate the whole book. It's entitled Earthquake Days, 1906, San Francisco Earthquake in 3D. And what it shows, as an example, I don't know if the people at home can see this, but it shows the entire city pretty much wiped out. And it shows rubble, lots of rubble, asbestos-containing rubble. And it shows also steel and iron buildings ripped up, twisted, and earth movement of up to 27 feet, rips in the earth.
So what?
This right here is on Union Street. That's a picture of Union Street, where it's just the rail line's completely ripped apart. My point is that there's no such thing as an earthquake-proof building.
John,
Just within the last day or so, we've had...
You got about 3 more minutes. Please
Okay.
finish up.
Just within the last day or so, there was an earthquake killing people in Japan, I believe it was. And we've seen how the federal government responds ineffectively to disasters like Katrina. Brisbane really isn't well prepared on a whole variety of levels. Next, I'm going to incorporate into the record the Office of Planning, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research guidelines on safety elements, open space, and hazardous waste elements, and noise. One of the things that's not happening here is I don't see any open space being zoned because of health and safety reasons. Hazardous areas are mentioned in the guidelines put out by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. I don't see that done. Next, I'm going to enter into the record the official court documents prepared by NASA's Goddard Space Institute's head, who's been the topic of a lot of discussion in the news lately. I believe his name is James Hansen. Anyway, this is sworn testimony in the form of a document, and it talks about California. It's in a lawsuit here in California, and in there he discusses a 33 to 34 meter rise in sea level. Now that means 100 feet. And I'm also going to enter into the record Al Gore's recent sworn testimony before Congress, where he says recent scientific reports show that our timeline on this is 33, 34 years, according to peer-reviewed science. So we need to act on global warming. That'll mean that all our fire department, the toxic waste dumps out there, everything's going to be underwater. all our infrastructure will be underwater unless we act.
Will you please finish up now?
Next, I'm going to enter Brisbane's official findings of fact, declaring that both the Sierra Point toxic waste dump and the Baylands toxic waste dump are blighted and constitute health and safety hazards. So those are blighted areas we're dealing with out there. The Sierra Point toxic waste dump is blighted, and the Baylands is blighted, officially blighted. And I'm going to incorporate by reference, as it's fully set forth here in Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth. Now, that being the case, I'd like to say a couple of things. We're still not prepared.
John?
He's got 2 more books.
I have a right to comment here. Are you going to try to cut off public participation? I have a right. I have the floor.
You have taken 10 minutes.
Wait a minute. You give developers and all kinds, you give staff, you give everybody as much time as they need.
You have taken...
And this is a complicated subject. Please.
You have taken 10 minutes. You've got 2 more. Finish up, please.
Okay, thank you. Do I get to take back the time for the interruption? I'd appreciate that, too. Thank you. We're not prepared. I don't see in our safety element a place for people to safely congregate, for example. You know, it says go out to the toxic waste dump, the Sierra Point blighted Sierra Point toxic waste dump. Why go there? You don't want to send people to a dangerous area that might be underwater. We want to have people go to a safe place, maybe the school. I don't see that we have any kind of tents, anything like that. No medical supplies for old people. You know, we can't count on the federal government in the event of the disaster that's coming our way. We can't count on the state to come in. You know, we saw Katrina. We saw the failures of the government to be adequately prepared. I think I'm going to suggest a process to you. You know, the headlines are full of nutcases shooting up places, getting into airplanes and having chemical bombs, blowing up federal buildings, like in Oklahoma City.
You've got 1 more minute.
We're not prepared. We're not prepared from terrorists. We're not prepared from all sorts of things. We don't even prohibit in our safety element biowarfare experimentation in Brisbane. We don't prohibit that. And that's really a bad thing. If we stop and think of the kind of perils that we really are facing here in Brisbane and think about them adequately and try to project the worst case scenarios and then prepare around that, I think we'd be doing the public a service. And that's really what I think the safety element ought to be doing. But I don't think it really does that. I don't think we're prepared. So thanks. We don't even have an emergency source of water supply, for example, like in the quarry. The quarry would be a great place for a lake or some sort of emergency water supply, but we don't have that. We could have that.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Oh, one last point.
John?
I want to caution you. I want to caution you all. There's a thing called toxic torts, and there's a whole industry of lawyers that practice this. And one of the places that they really key on is fraud and misrepresentation. And that happens when people fail to disclose the truth, or they try to misrepresent the truth by using faked up terms that are meant to deceive. So I would caution you against using words like cleanup or remediation or anything else that's false.
Thank you for your cautions. Your time is over.
Okay.
Anyone else in the public wish to be heard?
Move to adjourn.
I got a couple questions before we adjourn.
Clark, go ahead.
One of the things that was brought up is about alternative location for our emergency center. You know, the location currently being the fire station. Do we have plans for an alternative location?
Yes, sir, we do.
We do. Okay. And where's it at?
Right now, we're working on conversion of a mobile trailer.
Oh, okay. And then there was some allegations about us not preparing or being prepared for an emergency or of large magnitude, and I think we have been preparing quite a bit. Care to talk a little bit about that, Randy, just some of the stuff that's been going on?
So I think within the last 2 years, the city's made some incredible steps to do exactly that, to prepare for emergencies. You appointed a director of the Office of Emergency Services. since that time. We have had regular drills with the staff, with the EOC section staff. We've just recently purchased food, water, supplies for the EOC staff to operate under. We're in the process of installing a standby shore power generator system for the Mission Blue Center, which is our #1 shelter evacuation. That's our primary location that we would be going to. We've trained all of the EOC staff on the new NIMS policies that were required for this last year. That's the National Integration Management System. We're in the process of delivering the NIMS introduction course, which is the IS 700, to everybody on staff, which is a requirement. I know tomorrow night, myself and the CEVs will be doing a presentation to the Lions to talk about potential integration and opportunities they might have. Personally, I participate, as does Councilmember Boligoff, in all the emergency services councils that are held in the county. I participate with all of the planned meetings that OES has. We participate in a number of their exercises. I sat on the sanitation working group for development of Annex B to the SOP. So I would say it's not a fair statement that we have not been making plans. I think it may be more representative that oftentimes not everybody knows what is going on at the staff level and the incredible amount of effort that's being put into preparing exactly for those situations, for an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've been preparing for a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of planning to coordinate that, and hopefully we never have to exercise it, as if it's anything. But, I mean, we do have to be prepared, and so I know the staff's been working on this for a long time. So I just wanted, to get that, that update, and perhaps maybe we can. I know we've written some stuff in the Star, but apparently the information maybe is not getting disseminated to all the public as far as what the city is doing to prepare for an emergency and to continue our education of the public as far as what the
yes, sir. And you bring up that double-edged sword that I always struggle with as the director of OES, because the reality is this: is that the basic definition of a disaster is that your needs are going to be greater than your resources. Mm-hmm. So most of what we do, most of what I do in my capacity as OES, is plan on managing that eventuality, that we're going to have more needs than resources. And one of the things, while I'm happy and I'm proud to talk about the achievements that have happened, I hate to tell people that, because then that's the walk-away message they have, is that the city's doing something about it, mm-hmm. and people individually do not take the responsibilities that they need to take.
Right.
They don't go out and prepare their emergency earthquake kit. They don't have one in their cars. They don't have one in their homes. They don't make reassembly plans with their families. Mm-hmm. And so as much as possible, I try not to advertise it too much, quite frankly, because I want people to be a little concerned. I want them to take on the message that they are going to have to be involved, that they will want to participate with the CEVs, and that they have to accept the reality for that perhaps 72 hours, perhaps 5 days, perhaps longer. They may very well have to fend for themselves. They may have to have their own food, their own water. And if they are not on fire or being overwhelmed by a mob, that they are not going to get the response that they are used to. They're not going to get a Brisbane police officer there in 5 minutes if we've got 400 fires burning on the peninsula. And we have got all these terrible accidents where buildings have fallen down and bridges have fallen down. That's not going to happen just because you need to see a cop or you think you've got a minor issue. You are going to have to fend for yourself. And so thank you for giving me that opportunity to get that message out there, because I try to use it every time I can. People need to be prepared on their own. For a couple days, you're going to be living like you're out in the middle of the wilderness somewhere, and you've just got to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Anything else?
Just one other thing. I know, there was a lot of information that was disseminated by both John and Dana, which, I couldn't, and I don't think anybody else could possibly assimilate. But we did get some materials and have staff look that over, and perhaps it looks like we got a call coming in from the public, huh? No. That to see if there's anything that staff would recommend incorporating into the plan. Some good ideas. And I know one of the things that was, and perhaps maybe Clay, you and I had talked a little bit about this, about the European Union resolution, I guess, or that John had come up presented a disc on. talk a little bit about that as far as what that is? Because I had a question about that a little while ago, and how does that apply to the United States? Because I know that the European has standards, like a lot of companies that want to do business in Europe, they came up with the ISO 9000 standards. And Michael, you're probably familiar with those, ISO 9001. And there's also the ISO, the International Standards Organization, the ISO 14001, which is environmental standards, which the Europeans use it if you want to do business there. Now, how does that apply to this? I mean, I'm a little bit perplexed.
I'm equally perplexed. I'm not quite sure how it tells and what its relevance to the general plan would be, but we'll take a look at it.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.